The release of Stellaris Astral Planes, or Stellaris Patch 3.10, has been marred by bugs and by other game-stopping issues. Today we're going to be looking at the response from the developers along with the full patch notes for their 3.10.1 hotfix. I'm calling it a hotfix because they're fixing it immediately. It's in beta right now and then it's going to be pushed out and released on Thursday, and a lot of the problems are going to be solved. Let's hear more from the game director before we go any further though. Stellaris 3.10 Pixis and the Astral Planes narrative expansion released last Thursday, and it's been a bit of a bumpy ride. So the game director moved this week's developer diary a bit earlier than usual. Due to an error that was made in the metadata by the developers, many players were unable to verify ownership of the DLC at launch. The devs pushed a quick hotfix which resolved these issues for some players, but also introduced a different ownership issue through a checksum error. This prevented other people from being able to properly enjoy the expansion. The devs finally managed to fix all of these problems midday on Friday, and the game director would like to thank everyone who provided bug reports and helped diagnose the DLC ownership issues. They would not have been able to resolve them so quickly without so many people reporting that they had problems. So basically, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If you are unable to play and complained about it to the right people in the right way, it was very constructive. The game director then says that he is terribly sorry for the poor launch. They've just put up a beta branch on Steam containing the 3.10.1 release, which is currently planned to be deployed live on Thursday. This release includes a number of bug fixes as well as hotkeys for the tabbed outliner, and the devs would like to know what you think. I'd also like to know what you think about the Astral Planes DLC and the 3.10 release. Let me know if you've had any problems, what your thoughts have been down in the comments below. For the first few hours after this goes live, I am going to read through all of those comments and try and reply to as many as I can, because I'd like to gauge the feeling of the community as well. So with that preamble and foreword aside, and thank you to the game director for apologizing, not that I necessarily think that this is all the game director's fault at all. Let's not forget, this DLC was created by an external studio, and Paradox is a public company that is beholden to shareholders, and they've had some large reported losses throughout the year. We're coming up to the Christmas season. I suspect it was completely not allowed to delay the release in order to fix a lot of these problems before the actual release date. Anyway, I'll speculate about that later on. Let's dive into these patch notes. The improvements are a relatively small list and focus mainly on outliner changes. They've added Ctrl+A/D shortcuts to cycle through outliner tabs, and they've also added Ctrl+Q, W, E, and R to switch to specific tabs if you want to do that with the keyboard. They have also added tooltips for them, and these tooltips are currently in English regardless of language setting, but I think we can be confident they will be localized at some point in the future. The devs have also clarified tooltip headers for governor traits. We can see in this image from the patch that there is not only a tooltip, but the hotkeys are now available there, making it easier for you to change between the tabs in the outliner. There's definitely still more work to do on that outliner though. A lot of people want things like the ability to change which items are in which tab. I think that would be a good thing to have for those of us that want some versatility and modability in our outliner. As you may have guessed, if you've played patch 3.10, there are quite a few balance changes that are definitely needed, and the devs have been hard at work on those in this hotfix. AI empires generated as part of the Common Ground and Hegemony origins will now start with an additional official that can be assigned to the Federation, so you as the player will not have to immediately deal with lots and lots of low Federation cohesion. They've blocked Empire rulers and Imperial heirs from getting the Planar Theorist trait, as you couldn't really do anything with it if you got it. The Commissioner subclass now increases stability from soldiers instead of providing additional soldier jobs. I actually think that these bonuses or these changes to the military governor are really, really good. They've improved martial law, if anything. We'll get to what else has been changed in just a moment. So they've decreased the chance for leaders to get common governor traits if they do not have a governor subclass or are not governing. The most common amongst those was the unity trait that you were always getting no matter what your leader did. It was just like, oh look, have 5% unity as a governor, and you're not a governor, but suck it. It's good to see that those things are changing. They've decreased the chance of leaders gaining job-providing traits. I think that's the resource traits, and in some ways, I'm kind of sad about that. It was quite nice to get 1 or 2 of those early on, but getting too many was definitely a problem for certain builds, especially if you only had 1 or 2 trait options available. Detail-orientated has been updated to be a destiny trait for scholars instead of a veteran trait. I am quite shocked about that one. As far as I remember, that reduces the time you take to complete an archaeology site, but instead gives you either bonus minor artifacts, though I can't remember if that is as a percentage or just a flat rate of plus a couple of extra artifacts every month. They've buffed the Explorer class just a little bit to get +1 sensor range. That is one of the subclasses or the veteran classes for scientists. They have halved the effects of the Politician trait. Politician had been granting a +10% speed to your agendas if you got it to level 2. That meant if you stacked 4 or 5 of these traits on the council, you get a whopping +50% agenda speed on top of all the other agenda speed bonuses you can get, which was really broken. I mean, I was kind of getting agendas through in, 30, 40 months and running out of agendas in some games when I really put my mind to it. I think that reduction is good. I think possibly they might have gone a little bit too far. Maybe politicians should grant something else as well, rather than just bonuses to agenda speed. Maybe it should improve the happiness of our factions again, but maybe just by a small percent, like 2 or 4%, something minor but still useful. Having a commander govern a planet or sector now provides soldier jobs. So they've taken what the commissioner subclass did, they have given it to every single commander, which in my opinion is utterly crazy, and they then buffed the commissioner to give extra stability from soldiers. So if you have a commander governing a planet, a military governor, you will get reductions to specialist and ruler output, but bonuses to worker and slave output. On top of that, all of your soldiers provide additional stability. That means in the early levels, as long as you have 2 or 3 soldiers, and if you're a commissioner, that number is probably lower because you're getting even more stability per soldier, you can completely ignore the negative effects of having a military governor because the bonus resource output from jobs from stability will far outweigh the negatives that you get as a ruler or specialist working on that planet. Military governors are really, really awesome, and now they've buffed them even more because surely they weren't broken enough. They've increased the chances of the Prospector trait to fire. Oppressive Autocracy now has the colony shelter building replace a colonist job with an enforcer job, meaning right at the start, if you have only 2 pops, 50% is rebels, basically, or very, very unhappy lower classes, and the other 50% are the police. Kind of a lovely 50-50 mix there. This is needed because at present, when you settle a new colony, it would start revolting immediately because colonists are not specialist jobs. You don't get any other bonuses. They're a worker class job, and that really was forcing down the happiness far too much. Also, if you're enjoying this video and you'd like to get your hands on some fantastic discounts, the Humble Bundle Black Friday sale is on now. A whole host of Paradox products, along with lots of other things. We're looking at Stellaris DLC, we're looking at Stellaris itself, other Paradox games, and games like Starfield are discounted right now. There's a link down in the description. Go and check it out. Go and enjoy yourself. Go and enjoy those discounts. Anyway, continuing with the video. Policies that increase leader starting level now greatly increase leader hiring cost and upkeep cost. This, I think, is good, but even if you double, triple, quadruple the cost here of hiring these leaders, you either make the policy completely untenable and useless, or the leaders are still worthwhile. I have been able to, through my testing, get to a point where you can just hire level 8 and above leaders from every category, straight away. That means that you're able to get the manifest traits, the manifest destiny traits. I should call them destiny traits because that's what they are, I apologize. You can get the destiny traits immediately. So you can hire a leader, check what destiny trait they have by leveling them up, and then fire them if they aren't the right trait. And you can do that for as many times as you have leaders, and every 5 years your leaders refresh. It's, I think, a little bit weird. If you'd like more detail on that though, let me know in the comments below. I'm thinking about making a video on how to cheese leaders in 3.10 if that's something anyone is interested in. They've rebalanced traits that affect research output from jobs while governing. I assume they've reduced them because at the moment you could be getting plus 100, plus 150% if you include the scientist and all of the traits it had on it, which is probably too high. They probably wanted to make it on par with what an assisted research scientist could do in the past while they're in their science ship, but they didn't. They just made it so much better. Reducing the research output from jobs while governing, I think, is a good step. We'll see where those numbers are, though. They've reduced the magnitude of most governor modifiers. This, I think, is a little bit sad, but definitely needed. Governors were far too powerful on release of 3.10. It was honestly quite broken. They removed the can only get council traits restriction on rulers in democracies, oligarchies, and megacorps. For modders, this is using the is_autocracy variable scripted trigger. So, what do I think about that? Well, it's really annoying if, as a democracy or an oligarchy, your ruler is on the council, they can't do anything else but be on the council, and yet they keep getting non-council traits. I'm not sure why they've removed this. I thought it was a good thing to have in there. This does buff, though. This is an indirect buff to to autocracies and to imperial government types. Because then you're guaranteed that your ruler will always have traits, or at least whenever they level up, they will always get traits that are council specific. They've replaced champions of the empire +1 initial leader level with +1 additional trait. So that might stop us getting to level 8 overall, but actually I think it's still possible to get to level 8 a little bit later on in the game. There can be certain rush builds, so all of our leaders will be hireable at level 8 basically immediately, and that's definitely not even slightly broken. But moving on, resources from Psionic Pop's modifier now applies to latent psionic species. That's good, because latent psionics really do deserve that as well. They've reworked the Driven Educator to instead provide plus 25% leader experience gain. Okay, so Driven Educator, I believe, had +1 initial leader level. This now is kind of a nerf to the +1 initial leader level meta that's kind of starting to creep in. It's looking like I might not be able to do that video if they take away all of our toys. We can still get very good leaders, just not those lovely level 8 leaders immediately. Extra leader experience, though, is definitely a good thing. They've reduced the number of ways we can get that in other places, so getting that here I think is very good. They've slightly decreased the bonuses from Custom AI Assistant and Sapient AI Assistant traits. They've slightly decreased the penalties from the Neurosis trait. I didn't realize those were unbalanced, but fair enough. The soldier jobs in general in your empire now produce a small amount of base stability. So all soldiers are now enforcing the law just a little bit, it sounds like. I'm a little bit confused and concerned about that. I think that doesn't quite fit my narrative, or at least my roleplay for certain builds. Definitely for authoritarian builds and the like, yes, that makes sense. But otherwise, I'm a bit confused why they put that in, other than, you know, just to be giving soldiers something else to do. Traits that give homeworld jobs now require leaders to be at least level 2, which I think means you cannot hire them with these extra homeworld job traits right out of the gates. You can no longer sell exceptional materials such as astral threads and minor artifacts to the AI. I am assuming that you can also not sell them to players. I haven't checked in the beta yet, which by the way is out right now. You can test all of this out in the beta, but removing our ability to sell astral threads I think feels a bit weird. Why not? Why can't we sell them? Do the AI not want them? Is it too powerful? Are we just meant to kind of sit on these useless resources and not be able to use them for anything except what their original intended purpose was? I really don't know, but I am concerned by that one. And now we come to the bug fixes. This is quite a large list, and we are going to go through it so you can hear about the things that have been fixed, but also hear about some of the things that have not. Chief amongst these that I think is missing is a fix to the ship build cost reduction and ship build speed, which is simply broken in game at the moment and doesn't give you any ship build cost reduction or ship build speed increases. Mind you, I think that it's great that we don't have any ship build cost reductions, and honestly I want them to remove all of the traits that give us ship build cost reductions. I'd like to remove the traits that give us upkeep reductions as well, but you know, beggars can't be choosers, and I think we should really go to a place where we don't need them. We're already getting massive economies compared to where Stellaris was a couple of years ago. It's much easier to get much bigger economies. We're getting much bigger bonuses. The game is much nicer in that way. It's much easier to get larger numbers. But if we're getting cheaper ships, this is pushing us into this situation where we've just got an overwhelming abundance of ships and silly numbers. Why do we need that? Honestly, I know some of you disagree with me, but that's my position. I released a long video on why I think fleet counts are too big at the moment. You can view that somewhere. It's on my channel if you want to have a look at that in further detail. But let's find out more about these bug fixes. Okay, so if you're enjoying this video, please bug fix the spaghetti code of that like button. The seal situation is aborted if you attack the blank. I'm not going to tell you what the blank is. You might be able to guess, but I'm glad that bug has been fixed. They've added missing descriptions for multiple ship component categories. Reactors, auras, combat computers. Honestly, yeah, some of the bugs that seem to have crept in 3.10 feel very much like a step backwards. They've added missing node XP modifiers to the Astral Planes civics for Gestalt Empires. The AI Empires with a fruitful partnership origin will now stop opening seed pods on Holy Worlds only to get smashed to death by angry fallen empires. That's a good, smart thing they definitely should not have been doing. All types of priest jobs, for example High Priest, Numismatic Priests, now benefit from the additional trade value from the Dimensional Enterprise Council position. They block the Entrepreneur, or Ambassador, trait for Gestalt Empires, Fanatic Purifiers, Inward Perfectionists, and Criminal Syndicates. They block the Charmer and Research Exchange traits for Genocidal Empires and Inward Perfectionists. Yeah, they definitely shouldn't have had those. They've clarified that First Contact civics give an increased chance to draw FTL travel technologies. They've corrected all versions of the Sovereign Guardianship civic to have 150% empire size from systems. I was wondering about that. I thought that was a specific nerf to regular bioempires, and they were giving a buff to Gestalt because the Gestalt empires don't get access to the council position, but I guess, screw you Gestalt. They've corrected the draw weights for a number of leader traits. Yeah, the draw rates were really off. Some of those draw weights were terrifying. You were getting really bad traits that really did not fit the current role your leader was occupying as the devs had intended you to get. Empires can no longer spawn with multiple ministers of defense under some cases, such as being the Chosen. Empires created via status quo peace deals will now correctly generate their council. They've explicitly blocked trading of Gestalt nodes, instead of them being implicitly blocked. The devs have also fixed 2 Zroni dig sites pointing to a deprecated title. They have fixed a bug that allowed you to enact the dayside farm decision multiple times on a single planet. Oh, was that not meant to happen? I thought that was intentional. I really enjoyed that, damn it. They fixed a case where the abandoned star platform anomaly would leave the system's primary star without a deposit. They fixed a case where the Ion Trail event would occasionally pick the same system it spawned in for the follow-up event. Yeah, that was weird. That shouldn't have happened. They fixed a large number of planetary features that were providing incorrect bonuses due to changes with Mastery of Nature. They fixed a typo in the event for the Blinding Grief event, calculations for determining trade values gained from slaves, that's fixed, commanders wearing the wrong uniform on planetary assignments. Didn't you know they should be wearing a red shirt? A lot of these fixes so far are minor, but definitely useful. Still, there's a lot of things that I think really do need to be fixed, or at least clarified that they're intentional, that are missing. The Crystal Rift situation that was checking for the wrong amount of resources to validate approaches has been fixed. The Crystal Sphere stolen events not using the correct text and picture, along with the events triggering when the Crystal Sphere situations are no longer active, have both been fixed. They fixed the Dark Consortium displaying flag information in the tooltip instead of the standard lock key for this situation. That's localization, sorry. They fixed the Dark Consortium not locking the Civic when being played from the start. I'm a little confused by that one, because the dark matter agendas specifically tell you that when you finally take those agendas, this is an in-game, I think it's on the tooltip or it might be the agenda itself, that you will then be locked into Dark Consortium from that point onwards. So why would it be a problem, why would it be broken for the Dark Consortium not to be locked from game start if that agenda then tells us that at that point the Civic will be locked? One of those two don't make sense. There seems to be a direct lack of communication in some of these areas. It's almost like hiring an external studio to create the DLC may have caused a couple of minor problems. Anywho, let's continue. They fixed the dark matter breakthrough agenda, always stating it will lock the Civic even if it already is. Well, would you look at that? So, why would you need to say anything about locking the Civic if it's meant to always lock the Civic? I'm confused. I'm very, very confused. Fixed descriptions for artisan drones showing in district tooltips when none are present. They fixed eager explorers giving 2 plus 50% chances to draw improved structural integrity. I guess that shouldn't have been the case. It should just give 1 rather than giving plus 100%. Or does that mean it gives 50% twice on 2 separate occasions? Either way, I'm not sure, but the bug is now definitely gone. Efficient Staffing 3 has been applying incorrect modifiers, leading to no sector modifiers. That's gone. Habitat and Arcology Lab technologies were missing the increased chance to be drawn from being rare technologies. Hostile fleets were capable of crossing dimensional locks. Oh my goodness me, you know what? I actually hadn't noticed that. I had noticed that hostile fleets seem to be able to bypass FTL inhibitors sometimes in some situations at the moment. But one of the key new features was dimensional locks, locking wormholes, etc. from the enemy. If the enemy could just pass through, what was the point of that entire feature? I just shake my head, honestly, I don't even know. From Imperial heirs sometimes spawning with the incorrect initial level for their class, that's been fixed, to the issue with concepts being offset for all languages using TTF, that's a font thing. They fixed missing AI weights for some council positions, and they fixed missing localization for clone army commander traits. You know, I'm not going to say the word fixed anymore, just assume these are all problems that are now fixed, alright? Okay. There were outdated tooltips in diplomacy with trader enclaves. Some empires such as Common Ground Federation members or MSI started with duplicated council positions. Some triggered modifiers from leader traits were not being applied. Star bases not inheriting modifiers from their country, that was a problem. Strange wormhole breaking existing wormhole in the same system, if there were any, when spawning. There were culled reformatted nodes not having a level 1 trait. The dissolved Astral Rift event left a ship stuck in an endless missing in action loop. That's gone. The Archivist trait used to give scientists additional levels. It shouldn't have done that. The sector modifier for Ruthless Developer has been fixed. The Tree of Life and Lithoid created deposits were not providing all of their bonuses. And the Urbanist trait was displaying it was tier 1, and for any class when it was not a tier trait, and only for the official. Yeah, that's been fixed. For players without Galactic Paragons, officials should no longer roll Galcom traits if you are not a member of the Galcom, or Federation traits if you are not a member of a Federation. If I'm a player with Galactic Paragons, does that mean I still get to roll those and have those as my choices? Because it really sucks when I have an official that has options that are good for Federation cohesion and Federation related effects when I'm not in a Federation or when I'm not in the Galactic community. That really shouldn't be happening. Galactic community delegates now correctly multiply their diplomatic weight bonus by their level instead of their level squared. This is why for some players in some games, they found the AI's diplomatic weight completely overwhelming and just ridiculously high. I didn't know it was doing the square. This would also explain why I've had very high diplo weight sometimes with high leaders in the council, but that's not my fault, I blame the game. If your capital is in the Formless Home system, the Vacuum Flower Relic now correctly grants you astral threads. They've made the first option in the black hole instability requiring astral threads instead of rewarding them. Only leaders eligible for a specific council position should show up as potential recruits. Oh, that was so annoying. It was awful when you went to recruit someone for, let's say, a scientist role in the council, and it showed all of the possible officials and commanders as well as scientists that were recruitable. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. Pre-sapient pops no longer help you upgrade your capital buildings earlier. That is really cool. That's been a bug that's been in the game for, I think, like 2 years, 3 years now, where let's say I had 7 pops on your planet and then an extra 3 pre-sapients, well, the game would count that as 10 and allow you to upgrade the capital even though you really did not have 10. The prospector trait should no longer fire twice for volatile motes. They've removed artisan drone jobs from Ringworld industrial segments if it is not set to the factory designation. They've removed reference to Imperial heirs not having Unity upkeep because, of course, they now have Unity upkeep. I think that's kind of sad. Imperial heirs should not have Unity upkeep, and neither should your rulers, actually. No rulers should be having Unity upkeep at all. I don't think it's really reasonable, and it is very much impacting your upkeep early on in the game. Repaired Shattered Rings now use the correct in-game graphics. Scrapping the warship in the Adrift event now correctly awards you alloys instead of minerals, which is quite an old-fashioned bug, because Adrift is quite an old event and it used to be that alloys did not exist in the game, and therefore by completing Adrift you were scrapping a ship and getting what ships used to be costing, which was minerals, but it now should be alloys. Weird that stayed in for so long, but good to see it's fixed. Scrapping the warship in the Destroyed Warship event now correctly awards you alloys instead of minerals as well. They've stopped certain events from accidentally adding anomalies or terraforming astral scars. Good. I didn't know you could accidentally have that happen, but that's good. The excavator trait no longer erroneously requires the Rift Sphere technology. The Formless don't take you lightly anymore if you become hostile. The geology expert, manufacturer, and observer traits no longer state that they are scientist traits. That's good because I think you can get them for roles other than scientist. The leader trait Trader 2 now correctly applies its effect to the entire sector. The Manifestee's Head in the Clouds demand now checks for scientists on the council correctly. The mass extinction event change should work properly again, and the plasmic species trait now actually has a slave cost of 2,500 energy credits, which is quite a good one. The scout trait no longer states it applies to military fleets for scientists, and the Tzin Tithe trait is no longer possible to acquire by leveling up. I assume that means we can no longer select it as a manifest trait for our commanders, our generals, when we get to that level, when we're selecting our destiny traits. I'm kind of sad though, this really hurts some tall Empire builds, especially the one I released yesterday, and it now means you really need the lovely, the beautiful, the magnificent Gaia Zuman if you want to have the Tzin Tithe. And you have to look after her as well. Do not let her die. Not just because I love her, but because you should love her as well. The UNE will no longer spawn a third human empire to hang out with them for absolutely no reason. I mean, some of these bugs are just ridiculous. I don't know how they made it into a release version of this game. Wow. The Void Dweller initializing effects will no longer generate habitable worlds with absolutely no deposits. They've updated the upgraded version of the Assembler trait to use the correct modifiers. Vassalizing the Blank will now transfer their system to them if you happen to own it. That's a good point, because you could actually go to the center of the galaxy, or wherever it might be, and take that system before getting to the point where you have the option of vassalizing that empire. The Vibrant Storyteller is correctly marked as a destiny trait for scholars and not explorers. When loading a save, update some modifiers that previously weren't updated. I assume that means the game will update some modifiers. You can now use the Astral Jump Astral Action if you have psionic jump drives or subspace jump drives. I didn't know it didn't work for psionic jump drives. It made sense not working for subspace ones, but not working for psionic jump drives? Give me a break. Why was that not tested? The Dimensional Lock not working and psionic jump drives not working for some of the astral action abilities is really quite scary. I'm terrified by the apparent lack of QA that was done. Some of these things you kind of should notice if you're just doing regular unit testing, or maybe even doing a playthrough and you've got a checklist and you're going, well, what works and what doesn't work in front of you. Yeah, wow. Zadigal is now correctly fired if you declare war with blank on their recruitment day. I didn't know you could actually sneakily hire them and then declare war. That's pretty hilarious, actually. I should have tested that myself, and possibly somebody else. It's interesting. It's like either the QA team really didn't get enough time to go through things. This DLC possibly was pushed out early or pushed out to a strict schedule to come out before the holidays, before Christmas, so that it was available to be bought. That's one theory I've heard floated around. Or maybe there just are not enough QA. There's not enough resources for QA. And given the releases we've just had for, I'm looking at City Skylines 2, the new Crusader Kings 3 DLC, a whole bunch of releases actually where QA is being a big problem first and foremost, and it seems like releases have been pushed out too early. You've got to ask, what is going on in the upper levels of management at the company making these games? Why is it that content is being released? Why is it that payable content as well, it's not just free stuff, but paid content is being released in a semi-finished state? That really should not be happening. I don't know how to stress this enough. The community in general, from the people I've spoken to and the comments I've read, people aren't happy with this state of affairs, and I think that this situation may end up getting worse before it gets better, but Paradox, I think, definitely need to address this overall, not just for Stellaris Astral Planes, but for a whole host of their other games, and kind of explain what's going on, what's the methodology. I'm sure there is a methodology. If they could explain it in a coherent way that we could understand as the community, to explain why things have kind of gone wrong, that would definitely help. It's great to hear from the game director we heard earlier on how they're really sorry for a bad and buggy release, but this shouldn't be happening. It's a AA title. Not that I guess that means that much anymore. Even AAA titles are awful and filled with bugs sometimes, unless of course you're talking about Baldur's Gate 3, which has been a delight to see come out pretty much fully finished and with very few game breaking or just weird bugs in there that can and should have been found. They don't have that in Baldur's Gate 3, but other games definitely do. I'm not going to harp on this point. Let's move on to the next segment. I'm going to lump AI stability and UI changes all together because AI instability is so small. Sorry, AI and stability. AI instability is not so small at the moment. Yeah, let's go through this. AI changes. They fixed the AI assigning leaders to Galcom when it shouldn't be possible. You know what they haven't fixed? It seems like there are issues when the AI cannot assign its council after it upgrades, after it gets a new civic installed, because it ends up with empty councils. I've seen that again and again. It cannot pick the council positions sometimes. Not just myself, other people have reported these bugs as well. I'm looking at you, Sapphire. Also, the AI cannot seem to work out how to employ commanders as admirals on its fleets. That is making the AI seem much weaker than in previous patches because they are not getting any admiral bonuses to their ships, unlike the players. That's really something that should not be happening. It seems even when you ban the AI from setting their commanders to be governors, even when you stop them doing that, so they should be able to assign them as fleet admirals, the AI still can't do it. So, you know, the AI's definitely got some really weird bugs that are just not allowing it to perform at the level it used to be. That's partly why Stellaris feels easier than in previous patches in some ways. There's also the fact that the AI definitely relied heavily on lots of ship build reduction cost bonuses at the higher difficulty levels, which simply don't work at the moment. So at higher difficulty levels, the AI is suffering more than the player, even though the suffering in some ways the same, but they're suffering more than the player when it comes to not being able to use these ship cost reduction modifiers. Stability, what's changed there? They fixed the crash when running unlock council slots effect. Didn't know there was a crash that happened there, but yeah, overall, people are getting a lot more crashes with this release as well. 3.10 is causing a lot of people, myself included, to get crashes to the desktop much more than we have in any previous patches. We've got the issues talked about previously with the DLC not being registered, with some players basically not able to play the game or use the game at all, even though they bought the DLC, or possibly without buying the DLC. There's a whole host of kind of high-level issues making the game unplayable. But then even within the game itself, there really are quite a few bugs at the moment that should not have been added for a full and major release like this, especially not a $20 DLC release. That's half the price of the base game of Stellaris. Anyway, we're what, 32, 33 minutes of the way through this actually quite long patch notes. Here's how I'm going to do the secret call out. In the middle of this triple chapter amalgamation of nonsense, if you're still watching, if you listen to me ramble through balance changes for ages and then also kind of talk about the current situation of Stellaris and the wider aspects of what's going on around it in the company that is building the game for us, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear that you're still listening. Otherwise, from that, let's go on to the UI changes. So they've added text-to-system debug tooltips to separate the different lists of modifiers. Anomaly view research time label is hidden when the research time is hidden. That makes sense. They've changed the change scientist hotkey in situation log anomaly view to G. The DLC list is now shown in the cooperative game setup. They fixed Empire Creation UI remaining visible while ACB is open. They fixed layout of no scientists text in anomaly view, and they fixed the portrait frame appearing to the left of the anomaly UI if you have no science ships with scientists. They fixed portrait tooltips in anomaly view incorrectly saying that you can right click to remove the leader. In the anomaly window, if you get a valid scientist while no scientist is selected, that scientist is automatically selected. In the anomaly window, the change scientist button is disabled if there is no longer valid scientists available. They've updated the leader ethics tooltip to mention planetary and sector governor ethics attraction, because depending on the ethics of the governors you put on a planet, that should be increasing the attraction of the population there to that specific ethic, which I think is quite important. Finally, and probably most importantly, they fixed the leader XP bar showing the wrong tooltip. We can once again see how much experience our leaders have and what they are doing with it, which is really good. There's a couple of modding changes. I won't read those. Instead, I'm going to go on and read just a few more little bits and pieces from outside of these patch notes. The devs also have a couple of notes for Linux users that are encountering crashes. They've not suggested you move over to using Windows, don't worry. They have two potential workarounds though. If you are crashing on startup, players have reported that starting Steam, disabling the internet, then loading the game bypasses this issue. The internet can then be re-enabled afterwards. How bizarre. If you're crashing while hosting a multiplayer game on Ubuntu 20.04, switching to cross-platform multiplayer appears to resolve this issue. It is also not present on Ubuntu 22.04, so maybe just update your OS to the latest version of Ubuntu, though I don't know if that one's the stable build or not. I actually haven't kept up with Ubuntu releases the last year or so sue me. At this time, we're still tracking down Mac stability issues, says the devs, and 3.10 is already in progress. The devs continue their ongoing hunt to hunt down stability problems, especially for Linux and Mac users. They are fixing more bugs than ever before and adding more customization to the tabbed outliner. Next time on Stellaris Patch Notes, we're going to be hearing more about event chain subtitles, and there's going to be more about bug reports, feedbacks, fixes, etc, etc. Basically, it sounds like not really going to be looking at new development for a little while. We're just going to be looking at fixing the problems that exist with the current DLC release, and that's really unfortunate. It would be great if they were only looking at balance changes, because maybe something was slightly unbalanced, not just it's broken and buggy. That's definitely not a state we like the game to be in. It's also noted right at the end here that Astral Planes is discounted by 10% until November the 27th. So until that point, you can get Astral Planes for just under half the price of the full Stellaris game. Isn't that wizard?